Hi and welcome to the Odometer Troubleshooting and Warnings Guide. This video is about all the different warnings that you might get pop up during your use of Odometer. And the purpose of warnings are that they mean to alert you about any possible circumstances that might cause the output of the plugin to be different to what you expect. So for example, the most obvious warning is that we don't have a texture supplied and we need to hit create. So let's go and do that. Pretty simple. Okay, now let's go into text mode here, and we can see that by default included characters are uppercase and lowercase, which we have some here, Odo, Annie. The included characters options tells the plugin which categories of characters we want to include. If we had no lowercase characters, for example, we only want uppercase. Remember that Odometer won't warn you if you have characters included in your layer marker comments that aren't checked here. It will just render a space instead. Now, if we had no included characters checked, it can't display any of these, so it pops a warning. Under the Rendering and Quality tab, we can change the size of this warning, or we could silence it altogether, but I would recommend not silencing it unless you know exactly what you're doing. Another issue might be if we had no markers at all. Even if we had all of these checked, the plugin wouldn't know what to render. So no keyframe markers supplied, nothing will be rendered. And under animation, click add text key to add something. And the text key, if you have no keys at all, will add 2 by default so that you can animate between them. And then it will just add another one. Now, what happens if we have all these ticked and we want to make the texture larger? We're getting an error here saying that the texture that we want to generate, that includes all of these, would be 200 by 20K, and the graphics card limit on this computer is 16K. Instead, we can resize that down, and we don't need to scale it by half or double all the time. We can go into the Odometer texture itself, and if we needed extra resolution, we would come to File, Scripts, Scale Composition. This comes with After Effects, and I'm going to set a size factor of 1.6. Now we can include every single one of these characters that we want and increase the resolution. If we wanted even more resolution, we would get, too big, we could have to uncheck some of these. So now I can render it really large, but you will only get the option of 26 characters. Another warning we may get is, let's say we want to render this really high, so lots and lots of rows, and I also want to introduce some perspective. We get a warning. The texture height of 764 is taller than the layer height of 720. Now the texture height here is referring to how tall we requested it. This warning only pops up if perspective is on. So it says portions may be cut off because perspective is on. We can increase the composition height to resolve. If we had no perspective, we'd have no issue. There's nothing being cut off. But because we have perspective on and it's a post effect, we need the entire result to be visible without anything getting cut off. So let's just come in here and increase the height of the comp to 1000 and then increase the height of the layer to 1000. And we'd see now none of the texture is getting cut off. And so if we increase the perspective, there would be no issues. There is, however, one more thing to be aware of. If we have the layout in the middle of the composition, nothing will be cut off. But if we moved it up to the top left, we can see that we are still getting cut off. And we're not getting a warning about that because theoretically this layer is big enough, but because it's not centered, then we will still get something cut off. So if we move that back to the center, there won't be any issues. And of course, if you wanted to, instead of having a hard cutoff, we could add a soft feather there. Another issue we could have is if the Odometer texture was somehow turned to continuously rasterize. And we'll get a warning about that. The texture layer is set to continuous rasterization, uncheck it for correct behavior. And that's because now that continuous rasterization is checked, the layer that we are sourcing here has its transformations applied beforehand. So for example, I can now move this Odometer texture and it will be reflected. And of course we can see things going wrong there. The reason that this is a problem is because but also if we scale this down to 0, technically this layer is so small that it doesn't exist, and then the plugin's saying, oh, we don't actually have a texture supplied. So it's actually giving us the wrong warning. So that is the reason that you do not want the texture to have continuous rasterization. The idea is that the Odometer texture layer visibility is turned off and we don't have to worry about it. We could even set it to be a shy layer and then not have to think about it. Now let's just say we wanted to come up and create a Odometer texture, but that button wasn't working for us. But we actually have a backup just in case. So just say clicking create doesn't work for you for whatever reason, you can just import the texture setup here, and then we have the default texture as a composition and the glyph as well. Also in the download, we have a link to the written documentation. If we come back into the plugin under About and Support, click on Get Support, it will open that same link. which will bring you to our Notion page. And that has a bunch of frequently asked questions, as well as how you can get in contact if you have a bug or some issue that we haven't mentioned, or you just run into trouble. The best way to get in contact is via the AE Scripts ticket system, and we have a link for that there. So those are all the issues that we anticipate people having when using Odometer, but of course unforeseen circumstances always arise. So if you do have an issue, go through this avenue and we'll do our best to sort you out as soon as possible.